Good morning, and thank you, Betsy, for that reading from the 1930s. Between your selecting that reading and Jackie's hymn choice, it occurs to me that the message has already been given this morning. The key word I heard in your reading, Betsy, was unity, oneness, and in the hymn, the life, the truth, and the way surfaced most clearly for me. So unity is life, it is the truth, and it is the way for those of us that have found this philosophy to be a blessing at this time. This morning, in keeping with what I am most seeking to learn and hopefully share with all of you, the inspirational reading that guided me all week is actually taken from the Tao Te Ching, chapter 78, and it reads thus. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet, for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard. The gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. And because, as we heard in the opening statements, we are applying principles practically, I will read this a second time so that we might take in the power of water as a symbol of our spiritual unfoldment. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. So in that opening reading, I hear the three precepts that the Fillmores endowed this philosophy with. And it is my pleasure, my privilege, and my desire this morning to show that truth is truth, whether it shows up in a great Chinese teaching from the 6th century BC or emerges in the truth of our unity principles. I do not profess to be very knowledgeable or familiar with the Tao Te Ching. It came to my attention first in my studying the work of Byron Katie. Specifically, her book, which was part of a leadership course, is called 1,000 Names for Joy. 1,000 Names for Joy, with the subtitle, Living in Harmony with the Way Things Are. What she does in that book is that she allows one teaching from the Tao Te Ching to inspire each one of her chapters. And so in immersing myself a little bit more this week in the teachings of the Tao Te Ching, and some of you may have already studied this extensively. I know a couple of months ago, a prayer partner and I embarked on actually reading parts from the Tao Te Ching. And in as much as it presents as very simple literature, it is not easy to put into practice. So what exactly is this Tao Te Ching? It is a great Chinese classic piece of writing. Some estimates say that it is the single most translated work into other languages, second only to Holy Scripture, to the Bible. We are not sure about the author of the Tao Te Ching. Traditionally, it is attributed to Lao Tzu, who may have lived in the 6th century BC. A lot of sources say that he may also have been legendary, and that the teachings in the Tao Te Ching capture what has been foundational in Chinese thought and philosophy in one place. If you've looked at the Tao Te Ching, the Tao, it really comes through a figure that is called the master. The master is he at times and she at times. The master is really depicted as a mature human being, a human being who has gone even beyond wisdom and holiness to a world that includes a sane experience in living. The master in the writings serenely observes the ways in which all people make themselves unhappy. And so it is written in a way that at times sounds almost tongue-in-cheek, as it points to what are the infinite ways in which we endeavor to make ourselves unhappy. Stephen Mitchell, who co-authored 1,000 Names for Joy with Byron Katie, says that this master is just like the rest of us. We are all that master. He's like everyone else. The difference is that she knows the difference between reality and her thoughts about reality. I've been working on that one statement all week because to truly embark on comprehending what this wisdom text outlines, we must recognize that reality is changeless, and our thoughts about reality is what we need to gradually shed and let go of. The key, I suppose, the key teaching of the Tao is that the master understands and recognizes that he no longer believes that in this moment things should be different than they are. That sounds really simple, but I invite you to do what I have done all week, which is to apply it to any situation or experience in your body or in your outer world, and see if you can joyfully, freely let go of believing that in this moment things should be different than they are. When I can accept that things are exactly as they are and leave it at that, rather than believing a troublesome belief, which is that they should be different than what they are, then this is the freedom that the Tao promises. There are three concepts. Actually, there are three applicable concepts that we can take from the Tao that are resonant with unity's principles. And the three that I have most focused on this week are on non-resistance, which was somewhat captured in the reading about the water, the opening reading. Non-resistance, the importance of prayer, meditation, and the silence. And in the words of Charles Fillmore, the need for every one of us eventually to transcend what Fillmore calls the sense consciousness. I'll say those three again because the way that they show up in the Tao in an ancient Chinese text is clearly captured in different language. But in its essential message, the Tao teaches this timeless truth that we embrace in unity. The truth that the capital T truth doesn't change. It didn't change in the 6th century BC when these teachings were recorded. It didn't change when the Enlightenment came to the Buddha, and it didn't change 500 years later when the man Jesus became the Christ and brought the teachings that most inform our unity tradition. There are three, what I call qualities that define the teaching of the Tao, and they are compassion, moderation, and humility. Compassion, moderation, and humility. However, for the few moments that we have together this morning, what I would like to do is to share passages from the Tao which reflect the truth of how important it is that we resist not evil, in the words of Jesus, that we practice non-resistance, and we'll be looking at that next week with Imelda Shanklin's teaching on non-resistance being the key to peace. So I'd like to share those three truth principles: the importance of non-resistance, the crucial role that meditation, prayer, and sitting in the silence plays in a life lived in accordance with spirit that is peaceful. And the third one is the need to transcend the sense consciousness. So this shows up in the Tao in a variety of really interesting ways. The first of these, the non-resistance, is found in this reading, which is brief, that I would like to share with you. In the second chapter of the Tao, it addresses this idea of non-resistance. It says, when people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. This leads into the concept that is very important in the Tao of living in the flow. It refers to the essential harmony and the order of the universe and how this essential harmony flows through all things. When I hear that about the essential harmony and the rudimentary kind of order in the universe, of course, I'm reminded of the spiritual power, the spiritual faculty of order, which functions in our lives when we remove blocks to it. The Tao exhibits various aspects of spirit, even though it does not hold up as such a God per se. And perhaps that's a key to its wisdom, because unencumbered by theological constructs, it simply stresses the importance of the Tao, the life force, this energy that flows through all things. and talks about all of us as human beings being in an intrinsic relationship with the Tao. So of course that comes back to the unity that each of us experiences with the Christ. There is an interesting comment in one of my sources about a Sanskrit scholar, Juan Mascaro, who had skillfully translated parts of the Tao, and he had sent a letter to George Harrison asking him to set to music chapter 47 of the Tao. And this particular reading, for me, speaks to the non-resistance and to the importance of allowing the Tao life flow through us. And it reads, without opening your door, you can open your heart to the world. Without looking out the window, you can see the essence of the Tao. The more you know, the less you understand. The master arrives without leaving, sees the light without looking, achieves without doing a thing. I don't know this Beatles song and I didn't look it up, but apparently there is a song that George Harrison penned called The Inner Light. And so this opening the door, instead of opening the door to the world, opening your heart, that for me captures the essence of sitting in the silence. The emphasis on transcending the sense consciousness is described this way in the Tao. The master remains at ease in the world. She keeps her lightness of heart without intending to act with kindness towards herself and everyone else, and yet that is the result. The master is who each of us meets when we meet our mind with understanding. The word Tao, captured in the Tao Te Ching, actually translated means the way. You know, it is one thing I have especially found this week in seeking to apply this teaching. It is one thing to read about being in harmony with the way that things are, or even to understand that concept of being in harmony with things exactly the way they are. It's quite another thing to live that principle. In letting go of some of our thoughts, it is important that we can meet them first with understanding, recognizing that thoughts arise from a belief, and it is by questioning those beliefs that we can meet them with understanding and then let them go. In her work that is inspired by the idea of transcending the sense consciousness, Byron Katie says, I don't let go of my thoughts. I meet them with understanding, and then they let go of me. It's interesting that this total ease in whatever circumstance we might be finding ourselves right now doesn't just describe the awakened mind. It lets us see that having this total ease in all circumstances really is livable. It is a concept that we can apply. The other truth that comes through the Tao is that acceptance, non-resistance, as we call it in unity, means that we become lovers of whatever shows up in our lives. And when we love it, when we embrace it fully, regardless of what beliefs or thoughts or stories we might want to tell about it, if we can just love it, then our suffering ends. It comes to an end. Because as Byron Katie says, without our stories, all of us are pure love without our stories. There is a sentence in the Tao that says, open yourself to the Tao, to life, to the way of being in acceptance and non-resistance, and then trust your natural responses. So when we are surrendered, yielded, trusting, accepting what is, then our responses will be natural and everything will fall into place. The second teaching that supports the idea of transcending the sense consciousness is that the Tao says, if you want to become full, let yourself be empty. So this certainly applies to what in Unity we describe as practicing the silence, where we bring into the silence nothing, simply an openness, a willingness to experience the presence. So we present ourselves by letting ourselves be empty. We are clear, open channels. We are clean transparencies through which truth can shine. There is a point in her work where Katie says that the only prayer she ever prays is, God, spare me the desire for love, approval, and appreciation. Certainly this resonates for those of us who have been studying Goldsmith, who says that the barriers to an experience of God are exactly as she just said: desire, hope, ambition, and of course, our fears. The Tao asks, in keeping with this letting go, this non-resistance, with this ability to sit in the silence and just wait upon the Lord of our being, the Tao asks this question: do you have the patience to wait until your mind settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? And of course, this speaks to patience. It speaks to trusting. It speaks to allowing the right action to emerge by surrendering all our beliefs and thoughts. Again, a way of capturing this teaching of the Tao, which outlines loving and accepting exactly what is. It interprets in Byron Katie's work as, when you don't want anything but what you have, then you are free and life feels kind. In this excerpt from the Tao, I find the most reflection of the power of prayer and meditation. It reads, the master observes the world, but trusts her inner vision. The master observes the world, but trusts her inner vision. There is a concept that is very important to understanding the Tao. And so I'm just going to touch on the Wu Wei lightly. It's an essential teaching in Taoism. And it's difficult to describe, but it has been described as creative, allowing, or actionless activity. This is certainly aligned with how Unity teaches non-resistance, Non-resistance is not passivity. Non-resistance is actually a very active mental capacity. And so in the Tao, it's outlined as being not passive or not involved, but rather acting naturally without attachments or expectations. Certainly this takes practice. We all know and have experienced when everything seems to have just unfolded in the right and perfect way without any undue effort on our parts. This is what the Wu Wei is, this allowing. Athletes sometimes call this the zone. One author said musicians call it the sweet spot. The Tao Te Ching describes it this way in chapter 9. So here's the description of this non-resistance as it shows up in the Tao. Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. And so for me, this is another wisdom text. You heard in our opening today that we take the teachings of Jesus the Christ and we apply them in unity in a practical way to our lives. And certainly these three aspects of the Tao reflect and capture and teach the same basic principles that comprise our unity philosophy. That is the non-resistance, the Wu Wei, the allowing of the flow, the importance of taking time to rest in the silence so that those three gems of compassion, moderation, and humility, compassion, moderation, and humility are aspects that were relevant 500 years BC and certainly are important traits that we nurture, develop, and foster in the silence. Compassion toward ourselves and toward others, moderation in all things, and humility. There is an interesting parallel, just to draw to a close my attempt to share really what is not a very lengthy work. The entire Tao Te Ching is comprised of 81 excerpts, or in the Chinese original, 500 characters. There is, in a sense, the final admonition or suggestion in the Tao. It talks about the man of Tao. And when it comes to right and wrong, the man of the Tao is always deciding yes or no. You remember Jesus the Christ's words of yea, yea, or nay, nay. And here the ancients said, the man of Tao remains unknown, perfect virtue, produces nothing, no self is true self, and the greatest man is nobody. Much of the Tao seems to ring with these paradoxes. However, the statement, the greatest man is nobody, echoes the words of Ramana Maharshi, Meister Eckhart, many of the mystics of old. Being nothing does not mean being a worm of the earth of little account. It means that we release our identification with this changeable body, mind, and immerse ourselves rather in the reality of the nameless essence. Kalu Rinpoche called this great perfection. Ramana Maharshi referred to it as the capital S, self. Meister Eckhart called it the Godhead, and Lao has named it the Tao, the nameless. As soon as you try to name it, you have lost it. Charles Fillmore, too, often referred in his writings to this need to transcend or to release sense consciousness or mortal mind on our journey to higher awareness. And so there we have just a glimpse into the Tao, the life, the truth, the way. And I find it affirming, uplifting, revitalizing, exciting, and illuminating to know that 500 years BC, the principles which we now adhere to, the beliefs that we bring to our daily lives are in fact reflections of the capital T truth. Wherever truth surfaces, it is one, it is the same. The truth does not need me to agree with it for it to continue being. I choose to agree with the truth so that I live a life of peace, non-resistance, joyful time in the silence, and transcending the physical. And so it is. Thank you.